we go out on stage. Hollywood Bowl is so big, and we're a jazz band, so we play very quietly. And the strategy from the front of house point of view was to turn us up, you know, and with great volume comes great responsibility. All of a sudden, the low end of the stage was out of control. Everything was woofy and big. I remember having this moment of gratitude where, because of playing a Tele in that moment, having a more nimble, brighter guitar with not a ton of low end, all it did, the low end just kind of grounded the Telecaster, while I heard every other instrument get super big and kind of overloaded, overwhelmed. I felt like I got off scotch-free. Had I been with other guitar, I would have been navigating a whole different issue. Hello, Julian Lage here with my friends from Guitarcenter, celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Fender Telecaster. For me, the Telecaster is kind of like a universal tool. I'm not unique in thinking that. I think, from my understanding, the very design of the instrument, of this guitar, of Leo Fender's idea, was about a guitar that lots of people wanted to play and utilize in lots of kinds of music. However, when I think about the Telecaster, I'm probably drawn to the earliest days of the Telecaster, before it even had that name, in fact. I'm talking about the early Esquire days and the broadcaster days. The sound that I associate the most with the Telecaster is really coming out of the players like Jimmy Bryant, or even Oscar Moore, or players who adopted or played with the Tele at an early stage in its development. What that means to me is an instrument that, though universal, always has a very consistent core to the sound. Meaning you could add effects, you could not add effects. You could add treble, you could not add treble. You could play through any amp, but you'd always hear the fundamental of the pitch, the tone, the timbre of the guitar. For that to be so secure in an instrument, to me, is a prerequisite for the adventures of guitar playing that I love so much. Knowing that this is a sound that is stable and trustworthy is something that I gravitate towards. That's what I think of with the Telecaster. It's what I think of with those early players. Also, a big part of the Telecaster in those days, comparatively to what came after, is music. Guitar music was played at a lower volume, presumably, because the amps were not what we're playing today necessarily. There's a dulcet quality, there's a chamber music quality to the Telecaster, a feltiness, if you will. Not only to the fundamental, as I spoke about, but also just with regard to the touch and the way you activate the string. Those early days really captured something that I think of as like deeply seductive. But in my love for the Telecaster, I think of the history of the electric guitar, the history of the Fender Telecaster, and the history of jazz as an integral part of jazz ensembles, as all kind of following a similar trajectory. It's all a story of integration, how we find our way into the music, how we find our way into the band. And for me, the Telecaster is the most direct plug into that world of sound. It's completely understandable and common to think of the Telecaster as kind of a twang treble master, guitar. And it can do that, the best Teles. I've never played a Tele that couldn't do that well. When I think of the sound that I gravitate towards on the Telecaster, it's definitely the neck pickup. And I have a bias towards just the way that, I guess you have certain limitations with the neck pickup. It typically is a darker sound. In this guitar, this is a mini humbucker, but you're getting the same basic idea. The placement of the pickup being right here obviously captures a different moment in the string than this, which to my ear captures a little bit of the tautness of that break angle that happens right at the saddles going into the body. So I'm trying to get further away from that tightness. And when I think of one of my great heroes like Jimmy Bryant, it's my understanding he was playing on the neck pickup. The beautiful thing about it is it doesn't mean that you lack brightness when you're there. It just means you also include this other woody thing that's a little less metallic, a little less severe. A big part of that, though, is about how it's played. If I were to play on the neck pickup also in the same location, I'll use my right hand to demonstrate this, as where the pickup is, you can kind of reinforce some of those qualities that I'm talking about liking so much. Now, if I go a little further towards the headstock, sometimes it'll get a little darker, sometimes it'll get a little more hollow sounding due to the overtones and whatnot. If you go really far, you get kind of an oinkiness. You kind of change the sound of that. If I go way to the other end of the spectrum, there's some of that steeliness that I think of with the Telecaster, but it being, sent through the neck pickup. So the position of the neck pickup is in no way a limitation as far as the spectrum of sound you can get out of a Telecaster. It just happens to be the touchstone. It's where everything ends up. But because of, on a good Telecaster, if the neck and the body are speaking in a harmonious way, it gives you so much freedom as far as where you pluck the sound, whether it's with the plectrum or with your fingers or your thumb, and they all get kind of sent to this location. I spent one tour just to prove to myself that I could do it, playing a Tele on the bridge pickup every night in a jazz trio, and it was wonderful. If anything, I think the bridge pickup almost magnifies more detail. I'll demonstrate. If I go to the bridge pickup and I play in the bridge area, there's that kind of chimey, it's beautiful. Listen to that. It's like, it's an amazing sound. It's not necessarily bright, but it's more aggressive in a certain way. But if I leave the pickup where it is and I play them closer to the headstock, I regain some of that warmth that I associate with this part of the string. If I play lighter and I don't have such a strong attack, I'm talking really light, but I turn the volume up a lot more, you get something even warmer. Warmth, brightness, they're relative, so that to me still has has teeth. So the bridge pickup gives you liftoff. The challenge I've found, and this has everything to do with the way I want to play. I've heard other people have no problem with this. But my struggle has often been when there's a discrepancy or a large distance between my kind of resting timbre in the band. Let's say I'm really in the bright, high area. Once that card is played sonically, it's hard to reintegrate or weave myself back into the sound of the double bass or into the sound of the floor toms or the rack toms or the kick drum or these lower voices. There are things you can do to engender yourself to the low end of the band when you have a bright sound. One of the big ones, probably the biggest one, is the utilization of space. The less I play, the more impact it has when I do play with a bright sound. The less I play, or if I have judicious moments of leaving a big space, the more the ear gets filled with all the low end of the band, and I'm not hogging, the mix, so to speak. So like any guitar or guitar setup in a band, you're looking, it's a dance, and you're trying to find the moments where you contribute to the whole. If you're not careful, or if I'm not careful, if I'm on the bridge pickup, I just live in front of the sound the whole night, and it's not where I really want to live. But I know other players who do it masterfully. As far as picking what Telecaster to bring into a band, it's really whatever one I've been playing most recently that I'm most comfortable with. I have a lot of Telecasters at home, and no two are really alike. Mainly what changes is the weight and the type of neck pickup. Depending on the situation, I'll pick one, but I think I could probably play any of them and they would more or less get me in the ballpark of what I love about a Telecaster. There have been occasions where I'm totally caught off guard by the Telecaster, and always in a wonderful way. I remember with this very guitar, I had just gotten this, it was maybe a couple years ago. And I was playing at the Hollywood Bowl at the Jazz Festival with Joe Lovano's band, and I had two guitars with me. I happened to have a 1955 Les Paul that I've been playing for years with a P90, beautiful guitar. And I had this guitar at the time with a different pickup, kind of a Charlie Christian style neck pickup. On paper, they couldn't be more different. You know, this is extremely light, that one's extremely heavy. And sonically, they're similar. This has an airiness, that has a heft to it. I was convinced that the Les Paul was the guitar for that gig, and I was warming up on it, I was playing with it. And for one reason or another, I actually don't remember why, at the last minute, I switched to this. We go out on stage, Hollywood Bowl is so big, and we're a jazz band, so we play very quietly. And the strategy from the front of house point of view was to turn us up, you know, and with great volume comes great responsibility. All of a sudden, the low end of the stage was out of control. Everything was woofy and big. I remember having this moment of gratitude where, because of playing a Tele in that moment, having a more nimble, brighter guitar with not a ton of low end, all it did, the low end just kind of grounded the Telecaster, while I heard every other instrument get super big and kind of overloaded, overwhelmed. The nimbleness and the brightness of a Tele was such a good match for what the actual stage and the PA were doing. And I had this moment of like, you know what? It's not about me having everything I want in the guitar sound. It's about having a partnership with sound. And in that moment, the partnership with sound was really balanced. I didn't bring a ton to the table as far as volume and low end. The venue did, the stage did. I felt like I got off scotch-free. Had I been with other guitar, I would have been navigating a whole different issue. The interesting part about any guitar duo or two-guitar band, I've done a lot of work with Nels Cline like this, both in duo fashion and also with a quartet, is that you kind of inevitably merge into one giant guitar. Part of it's an auditory trick where you go low, they go high sonically, and you have this range that feels like it's huge. If the same thing happened with one guitar, it might not read as that big, but you're dealing with staging. You have two guitars in two different locations, and you just get cool effects. One of the insecurities I've had often about playing a Telecaster with another guitar player is that I will read as the bright one. And that belief isn't really founded in any experience I've had. It's just kind of like one of the many insecurities that just kind of bounce around our heads when we're playing in any ensemble. With Nels, who's such a master of Fender guitar playing, you know, of all guitar playing, and with a jazz master in particular, I've often noticed that what I contribute in relation to a jazz master is not brightness, it's transparency. In other words, there's not always a fist in the glove with a clean sound on a neck pickup on a Tele. It's almost like the note happens, but you hear all these upper partials, you hear the attack often more. But it's not a blaring brightness, especially not the way I play. And so I've been comforted that airiness is fine. If there's transparency in your sound, then in my experience with Nels, the jazz master just kind of embraces, almost like a hug, the Telecaster sound. So you get this kind of Russian doll experience where my sound fits into his, and hopefully at some point you don't know who's playing what. This year we're going to host a workshop that's happening August 19th through 23rd in Brookfield, Wisconsin. And the essence of it is to present teachings in honor of the way I learned growing up. Not because there's anything better about it than how anyone learns, but it's to say that there are some topics that in my experience don't really get explored. one of the big things I think that's at the heart of this is presenting education in a way that takes into consideration that we're all kind of self-taught. It doesn't matter if we have teachers or we go to school or whatever. At the end of the day, there's a reconciliation that we have with ourselves and with our progress that is paramount. You know, what do you want to learn? Why do you want to learn it? Where do you come from? Where do you want to go? How do you spend your time? Why is this worth your time? How does your studies directly connect to the music you want to make? How does it connect to you as an artist? Do you see yourself as an artist? Do you see guitar playing as something different than being an artist? The space, I feel, needs to be held to consider those questions. And once there's a clarity there, oh my goodness, the whole library opens up of possibilities. Because you can understand that what you might need, with the diet you need as a player, is very specific to you. And that's what this camp is about. My closest collaborators and friends are part of this. Margaret Glaspie, Chris Eldridge, Tim Miller, Jorge Roeder, Rudy Royston. We're all a part of this, but we're there to hold a space for you to be vulnerable, for you to slow down, not for the sake of doing it, but in service of whatever your path is. And with that, you can go so deep into these nuances. These nuances being improvisation, composition, accompaniment, harmony, rhythm, melodic structures, blending of styles, timbre, orchestration. These are all generalized words, but they have a really specific place in our development. And to one degree or another, we all have some sense of it. But it's, in my experience, the job of us as self-practicing musicians and self-guided players. It's our job to kind of orient ourselves to the path in such a way that it's regenerative, so that you become your own teacher, that you can drive yourself forward. And we're here to support you. That's the bottom line. So I'm looking forward to it. Here's a guitar that's been a part of all kinds of music. It'll be in the hands of those who want you to know it's a Telecaster. It'll be in the hands of those who could care less that it's a Telecaster. It'll be in the hands of those who want you to hear their message. And that is the superpower of this instrument. It takes on the character of the player. It also speaks to something that I think is really important, or has been for me, which is being on the path of practicing guitars. You look for anchors, you look for touchstones. It's not solely about, okay, I'm just gonna be great, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna achieve that. And I think many others in our community find great comfort in equipment, not from the point of view of having a lot of it or possessing it, but from the point of view that this is a source of support. On some psychological and emotional level, I understand that if I pick up a Telecaster, I'm playing an instrument that those I've admired have played and made great music on, and I too am gonna be okay. You know, it's a comfort thing. And I think that you find that across the whole spectrum of guitars. Every guitar has its, you know, on its best day, it's saying, hey, I've got you. You know, it's gonna be okay. I've figured out all this stuff so you can go play. And that's no small part of how we move forward as musicians. I can't say how the Telecaster will evolve and what it'll look like in the future, but I can trust that it'll always have the back of any player who wants to interact with it. It's my hope that the Telecaster remains accessible to everybody. At every price point, at whatever it is, I just hope that it stays available. And I have no reason to think it wouldn't. I personally look forward to learning how to use a Telecaster in a different way, and I've thought about this now for years. Seeing it in a deeper orchestrational harmonic light. You know, almost less as a soloing instrument. And I have a lot of work to do in that department. But it's there for me as it always has been, and I look forward to the future with the guitar.